Welcome to Uplink. The aviation dialogue starts here. I'm Shasta Ways.
And I'm Michael Wiles.
Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Uplink. We are thrilled to have Alex Gertsen, a seasoned aviation expert with over 2 decades of experience. Alex is a director of airports and ground infrastructure at the National Business Aviation Association, also known as the NBAA, with a rich background that includes roles at Lockheed Martin, the Air Traffic Control Association, and even the White House. Alex brings a wealth of knowledge and insights into the aviation industry. Welcome, Alex, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Shasta. Thank you, Michael. It's a privilege to be with you and to be sharing with your listeners.
Of course. No, I'm excited for this conversation, and we'll get right into it. With your work with airports and ground infrastructure, I'd like to get your thoughts on what are some of the current trends during the travel season for general aviation, and how are airports preparing to handle the expected increase in traffic?
It's a great question when it comes to general aviation, because general aviation is unique for every airport and the community that it serves. If we think about some of the airports in the northern part of the country, a lot of the airport staff are jumping off the snow removal equipment and are jumping on the lawnmowers. And because they all wear many hats, and that's what it takes to run a general aviation airport. So in the winter, they're plowing snow. In the summer, they're mowing grass. They're still maintaining airports. Some of the airports will have an increase in flight training, will have an increase in other traffic, as a lot of the light GA may not fly all season around, especially at airports that have a prevalent season with icing and snowstorms and other types of conditions. Other airports down south, like Naples and others, may see a little bit of a relief in traffic over the summers. Their season is typically happening in the winter. Airports that are more catering to people getting away, like East Hampton, really have to step up their operations. East Hampton has just a little bit, is a little bit shy of 30,000 operations per year, but most of those happen in period of about 3 months, May to September. And so the airport has to be really forward-looking. And over the years, they've really improved and have grown the way that they go through the season. They have acquired a temporary tower structure that they staff from Memorial Day to Labor Day, roughly. And also the FBO has to staff up significantly to meet the demand. They put in all kinds of operations in terms of managing the ramp and taking reservations, as well as what's really important for that particular noise-sensitive airport is everyone being well educated and aware of the noise abatement procedures, the fly quiet hours at night to observe those, and for helicopters, there are even specific routes that are created to get in and out of the airport. All very important in terms of managing during the busy airspace, as well as being sensitive to the neighbors.
Wow, Alex, so you pointed to a series of challenges that may come with the shift in traffic, and it sounded like you mentioned some like capacity or operational stuff or even noise, which I didn't think of. Can you think of some other challenges that these GA airports might be facing during this busy summer travel season, and what steps are being realistically taken to manage them?
As I mentioned, staffing for some airports has to increase. There are some airports in the winter that have contract staffing for snow removal. In the summer, if those airports have increasing traffic, they may also have to staff up both on the FBO side as well as on the airport side. Potentially, summer weather also brings in thunderstorms and other things. So pilots and travelers should be aware of that, and especially in areas where we might have really adverse weather, like hurricanes. I know airports in Florida are preparing for that. Should something like that happen, they have very intricate plans in place.
So all three of us here were pilots, and we have a little bit of understanding of like flying in the summertime versus the spring or the fall. What tips do you have for general aviation pilots to ensure safe and efficient flying during these very busy, hot summer months?
I think it's important to stay hydrated. First of all, and follow all the I am safe checklist concepts in terms of making sure that you as a pilot are ready. Some of us are not fortunate enough to have air conditioning in our aircraft, and so being conscious on a hot day, especially if you're flying in an area where air traffic control is going to keep you low, that you might be in the heat, you might be in the sun. We call the airplane a tin can sometimes, and sometimes if you're flying right into the sun, it can really feel that way and feel hot, and we may not realize the toll that it's taking on us mentally, just being in the heat. From the operational perspective, I think it's important, like I mentioned, the East Hampton Airport getting a tower. During other times of the year, it's just Class Echo airspace, and so don't presume that, hey, I've flown into this airport before. Continue to check the charts. Don't be surprised by some changes that might happen as a result of some seasonal changes for the summer.
So, Alex, let's talk about airport and ground infrastructure. Can you point to any advancements in technologies that might be making airports safer during these peak travel times?
There are lots of technologies that are coming online. Part of my work with the FAA is in the runway safety area. And we're continuously talking about how do we make our already safe surfaces, runways, airports, even safer. ADS-B is a huge asset to us in both having the data link, being able to get weather and traffic on our general aviation flight decks, but also being able to leverage the position information on the surface. So I know that a lot of the EFBs and a lot of the avionics in the aircraft can now alert you to the presence of an aircraft on the runway. For example, for flight, if you're pulling up onto the runway and there's another aircraft there, it will alert you. You can also see aircraft on final as you're getting ready to take off, or if you're approaching to land, you can glance at your iPad and see that there's an aircraft that might still be on the runway. All very helpful. Other aspects like extended center lines that we can have on our moving map displays help a lot with wrong surface operations. A wrong surface operation can be either landing on the wrong runway or landing on a taxiway, or even landing at the wrong airport. Having flown in Florida, we know that airport runways are typically lined up with prevailing winds. And so if there are airports 5-10 miles apart, they can all have very similar runway configuration. It's easy to get confused. So all of that technology helps our situational awareness if we use it properly. I always, when I'm talking to other pilots, advise to make sure that we spend some time with our technology on the ground, both the avionics and the airplane. A lot of people now go to the avionics shop. It's very popular to get the new Garmin autopilots and all the new screens. But you want to make sure that you plug in that ground power unit and spend some time in the aircraft with the new avionics. Or if you have an EFB, you spend some time in your office chair with it to become really familiar when you're flying. The FAA is looking to install some equipment at a number of airports that are being tested right now to operate lights. There's a system called runway status lights. And currently it's at a number of large airports that have surface surveillance radar. And the FAA is looking to leverage ADS-B to do the same thing. And essentially what that does is it flashes red lights to the pilot if the runway is not safe to cross, or if they're lined up at the threshold, it will turn on red centerline lights to alert the pilot that it may not be safe to take off because there's an aircraft or a vehicle downrange. So I think those things are coming sooner rather than later. and will all help us improve runway and surface safety.
Alex, I appreciate how you're talking about these advancements that just make the airport safer, brings more awareness. But I really appreciate the comment that you made about spending time with these systems and equipments, because it's great to know that they're there.
Yes.
It's very reassuring. But if we don't know how to properly use them, then that really defeats the whole purpose. I want to kind of shift a little and talk about a very important topic, especially to the youth, and that's the environment. From your perspective and all of the great work that you do, I'd love to get your thoughts on what are airports doing to become more energy efficient and environmentally friendly, and how will these efforts benefit the average passenger in local communities?
That's a very important topic to address. And that's something that we at NBAA have very much been part of and been very much focused on. At our recent convention in October in Las Vegas, we unveiled an initiative called Climbing Fast. And that's something that the listeners can look up by going to climbingfast.com. There's some great videos, some great information there. Essentially, there's a focus on sustainable aviation fuel, electric powered and hybrid powered aircraft, all of those things so that the industry can become carbon neutral by 2050. There's an initiative called EAGLE that all of the industry is collaborating on to remove lead from aviation gas by 2030. And airports obviously play a role in all of that. Airports are both homes to where we hang or tie down our aircraft, and also our destinations where we go to refuel, and thus they need to have the appropriate infrastructure to be able to support all these new programs and initiatives. I know a number of airports have invested in having additional fuel tanks so that they can bring unleaded fuel online now rather than waiting for the replacement to become available. And so a number of aircraft that can take unleaded fuel are already flying. And the more airports that bring this infrastructure online, the more they can refuel with unleaded fuel as they travel around the country. You know, a lot of airports are switching to LED lighting that is certainly going to save electricity, but also make runways and taxiways safer. Those lights are brighter, easier to see for the pilots. I think airports are also switching to electric and more environmentally friendly ground support equipment. And a lot of FBOs have expended capital to do that. That equipment is also quieter, so that helps the communities surrounding the airport as well. There's some airports where you can see in the remarks they would like to limit the run of the aircraft APUs, et cetera, on the ground, and so that is certainly helpful. Ultimately, we have a number of companies that are developing really advanced electric aircraft, both conventional takeoff as well as vertical takeoff. A number of them should be certified as early as next year. And airports are very much in tune with that. And a lot of them are working on electrification to be able to support those aircraft as well. So I think we're on the brink of some exciting changes in our industry. It's an exciting time to be in aviation. You know, if you're a helicopter pilot or a fixed wing pilot, there's going to be a whole new type of aircraft that you're going to have to get certified to fly, and that's powered lift. So
yeah, eVTOLs.
Right.
What are your thoughts with them as a pilot and an aircraft owner and someone who flies pretty regularly?
Yeah, I think they're going to be a great asset and a great addition to the traditional aircraft that are already flying. As any technology, it will take some time for them to both adapt, for people to become comfortable in flying in them. The idea is that their affordability will allow more people to use general aviation airports, and general aviation airports will be the place where they start operations. And so it'll be quite exciting, I think, for a lot of people who live around the airport but may not be able to take advantage of it because they're not chartering or renting an aircraft. They're not doing flight training. Now they can also enjoy a flight and potentially get to work or get to see family in a more efficient way because they live next to a node in the National Air Transportation System.
That's very exciting. And you mentioned something earlier about the community being a key stakeholder in the process or just in the chain. What can you tell us about the community engagement that is taking place as these airports either are integrating new technologies or they're dealing with increasing traffic? I know you talked about noise abatement earlier, but how is the industry interacting with community leaders or just people in the community in general to help them understand the importance of the airport being there?
It's a very important question, and we at NBAA put a lot of focus, a lot of time, a lot of effort in engaging with communities. There's a lot of resources that have recently been created. Social media, I think, helps a lot to both connect neighbors together to help them organize and be better educated about the issues. So what a lot of people don't realize is that their municipality is typically a custodian of the airport, and the control of how the aircraft fly and how they operate is all done by the FAA. And so there's not much that the municipality, city, county that owns the airport can do in helping the neighbors. But interestingly, I think we mentioned noise abatement procedures. We as aircraft operators can do a lot in a voluntary kind of way. But ultimately, in order for us to know what is best what would be most effective and helpful to the community, we can't do that in a vacuum. That requires collaboration. Unfortunately, sometimes when people think of community engagement, they think of very adversarial relationships. They think of airport commission or city council meetings where there's a lot of yelling, a lot of anger, a lot of angst. And I think those are examples of where the community wasn't engaged early enough, or where there's still a lot of work to be done. I do work with a number of airports where we have some great relationships with communities that have long-standing noise roundtables. For example, Teterboro, their roundtable called TANAC, it's been around for many decades. And while they continue to have challenges, as many airports do, they work through them in a very productive way. A great example there is listening to the community that was concerned about finding a relief to those who live under the approach on a straight-in final to an ILS or an aeronav approach to one of their runways. The Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, the operator of the airport, was able to work with the FAA and create a charted instrument approach that is offset. And so during some of the hours where traffic and weather conditions allow, we are able to use that approach and provide some relief for those who live under the straight-in flight path. There are many examples like that. Coming back to East Hampton, that's where I feel like we've had a tremendous amount of effort placed from everyone in the aviation community, from helicopter operators to seaplane operators to single-engine piston operators, and of course jets and turboprops, in finding ways that we can arrive and depart at the airport in the least impactful way to the community. And I mentioned that it all hinges on pilots and operators doing this voluntary. There's great participation. We see about 98% at most of these airports of pilots participating in the noise abatement program. And the small gap that exists are either those who truly have the need to fly differently, perhaps arrive and depart during the quiet hours, or those that have not been educated and have not picked up on what the procedures are. Interestingly enough, the FAA has just started the initiative, and it's good for the listeners to be aware of this as well, because this is coming, is to add noise abatement information into the chart supplement. The chart supplement used to be the green airport facility directory. And now we can look at some airport entries, and there's a lot of cryptic things in there that may not be clear. Ultimately, the FAA is looking to create an additional appendix and to structure that noise abatement information in a more concise and a more structured way, so that when we look at a particular airport, we can brief ourselves on the noise abatement procedures. Right now, a lot of times you have to use multiple resources. You have to use both your electronic flight bag as well as go on the airport website to look up what are their noise abatement procedures are. Sometimes it's kind of archaic where it says, for noise abatement, call the airport manager. Well, we rarely use our voice phone now, so that's not helpful. One of the things we're doing at NBAA through our access committee is creating layers that can be imported into the electronic flight bags that you can overlay over the visual or even instrument charts or approach procedures, and see where the noise sensitive areas are, so that when you're arriving or departing at the airport, you can be more conscious and again, if the weather and your aircraft performance capabilities allow, be more sensitive as to how you fly. So a lot is going on. To come back to the original question about community engagement, all of that is very important, because we cannot do that in solitude. We have to engage and we have to connect with the community. And there are many ways to do that through various roundtables, meetings, and just simply reaching out to the local community around airports. And I would encourage everyone to do that and to have those conversations.
It seems like every so often in the media or public perception about the role airports are playing in communities, and you've seen in some communities across the country and across the world where they face threats of being closed down because of noise or what people perceive as pollution. What is being done to, I would say, combat some of those things, or to, going back to the earlier question, help communities better understand or appreciate the role the airport plays in their community?
It's a very important question, because there's a lot that's happening, unfortunately, around the country where people are not seeing the value of the airport. And you're right, the talking points about noise and pollution are resonating more than the talking points about economic impact, the lives that are being saved by airport having a lifeguard capability for organ flights and patient flights, for the lifeline that the airports provide to the community should they need airlift during a natural disaster. And ultimately, the many, many amazing jobs that airports either have or inspire to create. I know Dream Soar, that's what you guys are about, is inspiring people to go into aviation. And if you can't easily get to an airport, especially a general aviation airport, where you can get out on an observation deck, where you can see airplanes take off and land, where you can listen to air traffic control, where you can come out on a school field trip and not have a big security barrier, where you can come out and go on a Young Eagles flight or another flight, an experience flight for the first time. Now, of course, being a pilot is something that is very obvious in aviation, but there's so many other jobs at the airport, so many jobs that are so important. And at the general aviation airport, those jobs are much more visible as well, versus a commercial airport that most young people and adults go through when they're flying. They see the curb, they see the terminal. You walk through a jetway, and if a lot of times the shades are down, you don't even see what's happening to get the aircraft ready. Ultimately, general aviation airports play an important role. And those airports, as you pointed out, are under threat because their role in the community and the overall aviation system are greatly misunderstood. Flight training has picked up now with the pilot shortage, and a lot of communities are up in arms because of aircraft in the flight pattern. They're concerned about touch and goes and misinformed about what touch and goes are in terms of noise, because ultimately an aircraft that does a touch and go is airborne a lot sooner than an aircraft that starts from a static position, and thus they'll be higher at that departure end of the runway. But ultimately, they see this as a frequency challenge of aircraft flying over the community. But yet, when they go to their commercial service airport, do they realize that the pilots, both in the left and right seat, did not learn to fly at that airport? Most likely, they learned to fly back at the airport in their backyard, so to speak. So all of those things are important. Both NBAA, AOPA, other aviation organizations like NATA, National Air Transport Association, Gamma Generation Manufacturer Association, EAA, Vertical Aviation International, representing the vertical lift community. All of us are working together on airport advocacy and on protecting airports. And airports have, most airports in the United States have grant assurances. Basically, when they've taken federal funds, they're obligated to keep the airport open and to run an airport in a certain way. There's also the Airport Noise and Capacity Act that was passed in 1990 that's keeping airports from putting in restrictions. We'll leverage all of those to protect airports. But ultimately, there's some communities that are very persistent. East Hampton, for example, they've waited 20 years to run out the grant assurances. And they tried to exploit that and put in some restrictions. Unfortunately, they neglected to remember that there's also ANCA, the Airport Noise and Capacity Act I mentioned. We had to be persistent and go to court even. And of course, us airport advocates, if we don't like to do that, but if that is the last resort and that's what it takes to keep the airport open and to keep that on and off ramp, if you will, into the National Air Transportation System available, we're going to do that. Also, a big part of that is defending the federal laws that exist and making sure that we don't have adverse national precedent set. Because if one airport does something that doesn't comply with FAA regulations or federal laws, other airports around the country would very quickly do that. So kind of the copycat mentality. So there's a lot of work that's being done. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as I was talking about earlier, it all comes back to engaging with the community, advocating for them, for airports having those open houses and airport days and 5K runs on the runway to let people through the gates. For us as the aviation community, to welcome people to talk positively about aviation, to expose kids to aviation. We know so many examples where when kids see a positive aspect of aviation, when they come home, they're the best influencer of their parents.
I was going to say, there's so many aspects to these local airports, but one of the things that we typically say to a young professional who's interested in aviation is go to your local airport and just walk around, ask around, talk to the pilots.
Knock on the hangar doors. Don't be shy. They're these big,
right.
Great buildings that are really intimidating. But if you can meet someone, there's a lot of really friendly people working there who would love to have you either as an intern or just to get you exposed to all the great things that are happening, from maintenance to scheduling to all the aspects that it takes to keep their operation in the air, literally.
And just from like a pilot perspective, I know everyone doesn't have this luxury, but I have been able to go all over the United States and visit, different parts that I normally wouldn't be able to visit if they didn't have a local airport. Right. So just the adventure and discovery of my country, these small airports allow that. So it means these airports mean so much to so many different people. So protecting them is really important. And we're so grateful for organizations like NBAA doing that work, and just really protecting these communities and airports.
I think maybe people don't appreciate that the airport is also there as a resource for them. So it's underutilized resource that they haven't tapped into. And I think if they also experienced it, they would appreciate it a little bit more.
Absolutely. But Shasti makes such a great point. You and I just flew into Tangier Island, Virginia, there are only two ways to get there, by airplane or boat. It's literally an island in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. It's too far to swim. And I don't think there was a commercial boat the day that we were there. So we had a very unique opportunity to experience that island and to see the culture of it, to connect with the people, explore. And also we saw that because the island is so remote, that runway plays a really critical role for the people there in terms of medical care, getting supplies in, and other ways that aviation plays a role. And it doesn't have to be that a community is isolated by water. It can be isolated by land. There's a lot of communities in the continental United States that are very far from airports that have airline service, but have a general aviation airport. And interestingly enough, they may have a booming business, a manufacturing business of some kind or a retail business in their town. And that's because they have an airport, because a company with a flight department is now connected. It's an example of, if you're in the middle of the country and you're kind of isolated, you could feel that you're in the middle of nowhere. But with an airport and an airplane, because you're in the middle of the country, you're in the middle of everywhere. All of a sudden now you're just a short flight from each coast, and you can get your people and supplies there very easily. But yeah, airports are amazing. And I think as we talked about advanced air mobility, electric aircraft, as those come on the line, they will definitely change the way that people see airports. Potentially we'll have some new infrastructure built that's strictly for vertical aviation, and that will be electrified and have a different approach and concept as well. So it's very exciting. I think, to your point, the young people should definitely go to the airport and should explore and find all the resources that our organizations have, including scholarships.
Yeah, well said, Alex. Everything you highlighted on just reinforces how important these airports are. So I want to be mindful of your time, and we'll ask one last question. And I think that this is so important because you and your organization put a lot of work into the recently passed FAA reauthorization bill. Yeah, so you guys you as an NBAA, and you also, with the work that you've done, have done a lot of behind the scene work to understand, educate, and implement policy to make our industry safer and more efficient. What are some key items that you'd like to highlight from the bill that you'd like to discuss before we go?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. Every 5 years, the FAA is up for reauthorization, and we as general aviation organizations have the opportunity to work with our elected officials on Capitol Hill to provide tools, both funding as well as different concepts that can be put as provisions into that bill to improve aviation. And the lawmakers do lean heavily on associations like NBAA for that kind of input. We were very fortunate this year that the leader of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, the chairman, is Sam Graves, who is a general aviation pilot. And as a result, this was the first ever time that the FAA was reauthorized, and there is a general aviation title in the bill, a section dedicated to general aviation. So there's a lot of great provisions there. Too many to cover here. I encourage everyone, if they're curious and they're interested in seeing how legislation impacts aviation, to look up the law and see all the great things. But there are things in there from protecting and growing the airport improvement program, authorizing more funding for airports, which is critically needed as we've seen the construction costs have gone up, labor costs have gone up. So the funding for those safety efficiency projects must be increased as well to keep up with the economy. There's a lot of great provisions for safety management systems. And something that's important to NBAA and our members is the improved privacy provisions, so that we can operate safely and with more privacy, both from the competitiveness perspective as well as a security perspective for a lot of people who use general aviation. That's really important. There's a lot of digitization and modernization for the FAA and in the bill as well. And obviously living in 2024 when everything is so automated with AI coming online, all of that is really important. There's also some provisions to address some real challenges that our industry faces, like pilot mental health, as well as strengthening the aviation workforce. We've talked quite a bit about that, but also helping welcome the advanced air mobility and support of the new infrastructure that's going to be needed for charging, the regulation, the SFAR for certificating pilots. That's all coming online. A lot of exciting things in there. And again, we're very proud of the efforts that took place to get the bill passed and the collaborative work that we've done with the lawmakers on both sides of the Capitol, both the Senate and the House, to bring that bill to reality.
Awesome. Well, man, Alex, you've been such a wealth of knowledge. I think we could easily have you back on to talk about this in even more detail. But there's so much that you've given us to think about and even our listeners to wrap their minds around, and just helping them to understand and appreciate the role the airports play in their communities, but also what these groups do, these trade groups do. And I think we take that for granted, and you've done a really great job in helping us appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, and it's a true privilege. I really appreciate the opportunity. NBAA, I'm just one of many people who are doing a lot of great things. So I encourage your listeners to go on the website, nba.org, take a look at all the things that we do, take a look at our conferences and events. There's a lot of opportunities for professional development, a lot of opportunities to engage with the industry. Again, I mentioned lots of scholarships available for young people from the industry. And if you have questions, would like to reach out to me, please contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and help you either start your career or grow your career or get engaged with business aviation. We're such an exciting industry, such a vibrant industry. There's so much happening that we'd love for you to take a more active role in it. So thank you very much, both Shasta and Michael.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. Before we move on, we've got just a couple of important housekeeping notes for all of our listeners out there. The first is join Uplink Link Up community. Here's one benefit of joining. If you're looking to dive deeper into the world of aviation and join the conversation, we'd love for you to be a part of our Uplink Link Up community. It's a great space where enthusiasts like you can discuss, debate, and share insights about everything aviation. Joining is super easy. Just head over to our website or check out the show notes for the link in our Uplink Link Up WhatsApp group. We have a general group for aviation discussions, and we have a special Uplink Link Up DC Metro group for our listeners in the DC area. Being part of Uplink Link Up means you get to interact directly with us and other aviation enthusiasts. It's a fantastic way to get your questions answered, share your opinions, and even influence future podcast topics. So don't miss out on being part of the Uplink Link Up community.